The 2026 Oklahoma legislative session is nearly completed, and on this week's episode of Lincoln to Local, we'll take a look at the latest action of numerous bills that Oklahoma Farm Bureau has been watching and working on as we round the corner into the final few days of the 2026 Oklahoma legislative session. Well, Gage, it's the middle of May, and while legislative session technically has a couple weeks yet before we sine die, a lot of legislative action has happened since we talked last to Lincoln to Local, and the state legislature is really starting to wrap things up for most intents and purposes. So if you can just give us an update on where we're at in the legislative schedule right now.
Yeah, so they had a deadline week this week. By Thursday, all bills had to be across the opposite chamber of the chamber that they originated in. And the Senate kind of got through bills a little bit more quickly. And actually on Wednesday, they didn't have a quorum to even hear anything. And then the Senate didn't convene on Thursday. But the opposite of that, over in the House, they continue to work on bills all week long. Got quite a few bills done on Wednesday, and then stayed late on Thursday. Heard about 130 bills in one day on Thursday to get some of those things wrapped up. They have both adjourned for the week and have passed a resolution that they will sine die next week, but we do expect them both to come back at least one day next week to wrap up some things they're continuing to work on.
Now, with everything that the legislature has worked on and passed and not passed, I guess in some cases, Farm Bureau has seen some bills move a lot of different directions. I guess the first category of bills are ones that didn't quite make it through the entire legislative process this time around. Which bills are those that you guys have been watching that didn't quite make it?
Yeah, well, we talked about some of these same bills all session long, and it seems like you try to stop them at one point if it's a bill we don't like, and they keep moving on, and so you move on to the next step and try to stop them, and vice versa with the bills we like. It just seems like there's always another hurdle to get them across. So some of those bills that we were working against, two of them had to do with designating new scenic rivers in southeast Oklahoma. We have clear policy that opposes naming any new scenic rivers in Oklahoma. Started out as a Senate Bill 2157. It made it through a Senate committee, and we were able to keep it from being heard on the Senate floor. But some of these legislators are very persistent in trying to get their ideas done, and they pulled a bill that was held over from last year in a conference committee and put that language in Senate Bill 133, and it was signed out of a House conference committee. It was signed out of a Senate conference committee, but got over to the House, and we talked to those committee members and talked to the author of the bill, and they all agreed not to move that one forward for this year. It's an issue we'll work on next year. And then we had another bill, Senate Bill 2143, dealing with aerial satellite imagery being used for assessors to assess value of property for property taxes. And it's one that kind of coasted through the Senate early on. We had some members call us about it, had some concerns about it, and it was one of those bills that the intent of the bill and what the bill actually said maybe were two different things. So we expressed strong opposition to that bill, and it was heard on the House floor on Thursday morning, but it was ultimately defeated on the House floor, so we were happy to see that happen.
In addition to those bills that didn't quite make it through the process, many of which I know Farm Bureau was watching and hoping they wouldn't make it through the process, there's numerous bills that Farm Bureau supported and worked to pass, and some of those have made it almost across the finish line, I guess, to where the legislature, both chambers, has signed off, and they're now sitting on the governor's desk awaiting action. Which bills are those that we're still waiting on gubernatorial action?
Yeah, we have a few bills that have made it through the process, and like I say, we're hoping the governor signs them, but there is the option he has to not sign them, and at this stage in the process, that at that point, they would go to the Secretary of State without the governor's signature, which ultimately would say they would go into law without the signature. But he could also veto those bills, so we hope that doesn't happen, but it is something that could happen. But a few of those bills are Senate Bill 1944, dealing with ag employee workmen's compensation. Bill we supported, kind of afraid it was going to get an amendment put on the end, but it didn't, so it was able to go to the governor's desk. We also had a bill, Senate Bill 2112, dealing with open pasture roads, and it was one that did get an amendment in the House, so it had to go back to the Senate, but we were able to get it through there and sent it on as well. And then House Bill 3977 that requires the state veterinarian to have food animal experience for whoever they put in that position in the future. And that's one that got done this last week and is headed to the governor waiting for his action.
In addition to the bills that are kind of waiting the final step before becoming law, we've seen some bills that have made it that far and are now enacted. Which bills are those, and what action was taken on them?
So one of them is one we had a lot of support for, was House Bill 4054, and that was the one that gave funding to OSU for their wheat research facilities. And it went to the governor, and the governor did not sign it, but luckily he didn't veto it, and it was one of those that went into law without his signature. So we were excited to see that one get done. And then we had a couple others that the governor did sign. One of those was House Bill 3464 that sets some standards for renewable energy facilities. An issue we've been working on for a couple of years, and this got some things done that we'd like to see, and we're happy to have the governor's support in signing that one. One other one was House Bill 2134, dealing with those livestock that are involved in vehicle accidents and providing some training to tow truck drivers and emergency management that responds to those scenes, making sure that those animals are humanely treated and taken care of, and they have a plan put in place. That one went to the governor. He did sign it. And then another fun one we got to work on, Senate Bill 2159, designates wheat as the official crop of Oklahoma. And we actually had Burlington FFA had that idea for that bill, and they ran it across the House floor on Ag Day, and Burlington FFA was able to come in that day, watch it go across the floor, which was the final step it needed before it headed to the governor, and then the governor did sign that one. So a fun bill that we got to work on that one.
Now, even with all these bills that now we know where they have ended up at the 2026 legislature, there's still time, technically, as we talked about at the beginning, for things to happen. And I know there's one bill that Farm Bureau still has kind of sitting on the shelf that we've been talking a lot about, dealing with water, that could be taken up, or maybe it'll be left alone. But what is that bill, and kind of what are we watching on it?
Yeah, so we've talked all along about several different water bills, and we kind of thought it would be narrowed down to one. Well, we finally got far enough in the program that we're down to one, and it's Senate Bill 259 by Howard of the Senate and Newton of the House. And it's one that came across the Senate floor in timely fashion, made it over to the House, made it through both committees in the House that it needed to, had an amendment put on, had an amendment taken off, and then we worked with Representative Newton getting that bill to the floor. We put several amendments in there by taking some language out and then adding some other language as well to get it into a form that it would be supported, because it also had some funding for the Oklahoma Water Resources Board tied to that bill. If it passes, they get some extra money. If it doesn't pass, then that funding won't be available for them, at least this year. So it made it across the House floor, but since it has those amendments, it does have to go back to the Senate. So it made all the deadlines it needed to make. It's still alive. We will see if the Senate meets next week and takes that up, but it is a possibility.
Now, with all the legislative action kind of winding down for 2026, I know in Farm Bureau that doesn't mean that we just stop working on policy. Kind of what are some of those few next steps that our members have their eyes on to continue working on our advocacy issues and efforts?
Yeah, right. We never end over here at Farm Bureau. As even in the policy world, we'll be working on developing that policy. It won't be long that August will be here. We'll have our August area meetings where we kind of start that policy making process as we go into resolutions in October, and then our convention in November, where we will set that new policy and get our policy book updated before next legislative session. But we also have an election year this year, so we have a lot going on with that. Our Ag Fund will be meeting, and our counties are already meeting, discussing those candidates and those races, and we expect Farm Bureau to be involved in that election process as well.
Well, I know a lot on the horizon yet, and we'll all keep working on it, but we appreciate your time, Gage, and for keeping us updated all session long.